stumble to the kitchen, pour myself a cup of ambition, and yawn and stretch and try to come to life. Jump in the shower and the blood starts pumping. Out on the streets, the traffic starts jumping. With folks like me on the job from 9 to 5. Working 9 to 5. What a way to make a living. Barely getting by. It's all taking and no giving. They just use your mind and they never give you credit. It's another.
Welcome back, Office Hours Live. Now, you may wonder why I have these glasses on. It's because I just had a birthday. And I want to thank all of you here for helping me celebrate. Thank you. That was Zoe Umlaut. Thank you, Zoe. And there are many, many others here who are celebrating as well. But the birthday is over, and we've got to move on to much more serious topics. And I want to remind you, we are live, and you're live, and I'm live, and we are live. This is a live program. And every week it's at this time at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. on Eastern. It's not the greatest time for a lot of you, I understand. We're considering moving to prime time, but we're not quite ready for prime time. But if you would like us to move to prime time, make sure you let us know. Also, you can watch this later. Make sure you share with others. Also, there's a little button somewhere up there that you can press to be reminded when we are on. And there's a lot to talk about this week, besides my birthday. I mean, for example, what we're going to do today is talk about 3 topics. One is Hillary Clinton and Elizabeth Warren. We're going to talk about Brexit. We're going to talk about, not about Trump, unless you want to talk about Trump in your questions. We'll talk about the Supreme Court, several important Supreme Court decisions. And so, number 1, which would be, is this going to be the ticket? Is this going to be a Clinton-Warren ticket? Well, I'll tell you, I've been around politicians for years, and I saw the chemistry between the two of them Monday in Cincinnati, and it looked like they were not only getting along very well, but I liked the way they interacted. I also, in terms of my own values, and maybe your values, I liked what I heard from both of them, because not only was Elizabeth Warren, but Hillary Clinton sounded more and more like Elizabeth Warren, and even like Bernie in terms of a very progressive message. So I think it's smart, and it would be smart for Hillary to team up with Elizabeth Warren. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Many political pundits I talk with, many political operatives in Washington say no. It would be a terrible idea. There is no way America is going to vote for 2 women. I think they're wrong. You know what I remember in 1992 when Bill Clinton teamed up with somebody who was very much like him, same demographic, a rather young man named Al Gore, and a lot of pundits said, no, you want to get somebody who is different, who is older, or looks different, or is a different part of the country. But Al Gore from Tennessee, Bill Clinton from Arkansas proved a very good combination. I think the same is true of Hillary Clinton and Elizabeth Warren. But what does that have to do with Brexit? Well, it doesn't have anything to do with Brexit except one thing. Look, there's been a lot of kind of hyperbole over Britain's decision last Thursday to exit from the European Union. And I understand it came as a big surprise. Most people had not predicted it. I hadn't predicted it. Does it mean the sky is falling? No. The stock market had a rough day on Friday. It is doing better and better today. I think the economic implications for the United States in the short term are actually rather good, because it means that a lot of money is going to be coming to the United States as a safe haven, and that means the dollar goes up, and that means everything we buy from abroad is cheaper. If you're planning a vacation abroad, you might as well, think about it even more than you're thinking about it now. Also, interest rates are going to be kept down in the United States because of all of that money coming into the United States. So in the short term, it's fine. In the longer term, I'm concerned not only because it increases the likelihood of a recession in Europe and in Britain, but I'm concerned because of what it symbolizes. The post-war experiment in European unification was a very important experiment, not only economically and socially, but also politically. It was the foundation for NATO. We need a united Europe. I mean, for selfish reasons we do, and also I think it's too bad that the the bureaucrats in Brussels just didn't understand how to do it and make people feel like they were part of it. And so that very much this Brexit is it came as a repudiation of what a lot of people in Britain are feeling in terms of economic stress. They feel like nobody's listening. A lot of other people in Europe feel the same way. And incidentally, when Donald Trump heard about the vote in Brexit, he celebrated. He said, great. Why? Because there is a tinge of not only nationalism, but also racism in that vote. Some people in Britain voted to get out of Europe because they were afraid that Turkey was coming into Europe, and there are already a lot of people in Europe that they didn't want to come over to Britain, and they didn't want their borders open. And that kind of fierce exclusionary nationalism is growing. More about that later, but let me just move on quickly to the Supreme Court. So there are two big Supreme Court decisions, one that I think we can celebrate, and that is on abortion, and the other one that is a real problem with regard to immigration. First of all, on immigration. Now, the Supreme Court actually didn't decide anything. It just split 4-4, and that's one of the big problems of having an 8-person Supreme Court with 4 Republican nominees and 4 Democratic nominees. It's going to split on a lot of issues, which means that the lower court decision striking down President Obama's executive order on immigration stood. Which means the executive order is struck down, which is insane. I mean, all the executive order did was announce what we all understood anyway, and that is that the executive has some discretion over setting priorities in terms of how laws are going to be enforced. In this case, the immigration laws. And it was not going to be enforced against parents of children born in the United States and so on, even if they were born in the United States illegally. But the Supreme Court, by basically splitting, by being deadlocked, that lower court is determining the fates of millions and millions of people who are here in the United States working very hard. It makes a shambles of our immigration policy. We need immigration reform, which is another reason why we've got to take back the Senate, and we've got to do everything we can to take back the House, and we also have to make sure that a Democrat is in the White House. Hello? But here, the interesting thing about the abortion decision, which basically struck down Texas's very anti-abortion set of regulations, saying that women had to have, every abortion clinic had to be outfitted like a hospital and all that. I mean, Texas said it was all about women's health, but what the Supreme Court understood is that that was a pretext. It was hypocrisy. What Texas really wanted to do is make sure that women could not have abortions, and abortions were becoming almost impossible to have in Texas. Other states were following the same hypocritical route, and the Supreme Court says, no, that is absolutely, this is not about women's health. This is about anti-abortion, and that's not allowed under Roe against Wade. We've already made that decision, folks, and the Supreme Court is right. And today, in the wake of the yesterday decision, already several states, Mississippi, Alabama, Wisconsin, their anti-abortion, so-called women's health rules and regulations and laws are reaching legal dead ends. 10 other states, they will reach legal dead ends as well. There's going to be a lot of litigation about this, but the Supreme Court is the law of the land. So partly good news today, right? I mean, it's not as gloomy and doomy as it was in past weeks. So let's have your questions, and your questions beginning right now. I think the House sit-in was lame, says Shirley McKinnon. Am I missing something? I didn't think the House, you're talking about the House sit-in the other day over a failure to even provide the Democrats with an opportunity to vote on the most modest kind of gun legislation. I mean, this was gun legislation that said essentially people who are on the no-fly list because they're suspected terrorists should be on a no-buy list and shouldn't be able to get guns. And that's just is that a really powerful piece of gun legislation? No, but nevertheless, the Republicans would not even allow a vote on this modest, little, tiny, micro piece of reform. And so the House members, I think it's really a sad testament of the powerlessness of the Democrats in the House of Representatives. I mean, you have to have a sit-in. I remember having a sit-in. I had a sit-in in 1965. I was in a sit-in in New England over, over one particular restaurant's reluctance or refusal to serve African Americans. That was a sit-in. You did that because you either lacked power or you needed other people to join you who lacked power so you could win over public sentiment, so you could make headlines. But for the Democrats in the House to have a sit-in over failure to be able to vote on such a paltry little piece of anti-gun legislation is really sad. Lame. All right. Great Waters, what's your response to the Senate Republicans that voted nay to the gun proposals, and how would you propose we go forward? Isn't this just more proof that our Congress and political system is bought and paid for by special interests such as the National Rifle Association? Greg, you are right. I mean, that's the whole issue. We've got to get the special interests, particularly the money interests, like the big gun manufacturers, by the way, who are in back of the NRA. We've got to get them out. We've got to get big money out of politics. Greg? That's the step forward. That's the first step forward. That is what Bernie Sanders' campaign mostly represents, or represented, whether you want to use the present tense or the past tense. Nobody is talking about the gun manufacturers. The gun manufacturers are the power behind the National Rifle Association. They are making huge amounts of money. All right, Hannah Humans. Why is it so difficult to remove weapons of mass destruction, which I believe armor-piercing bullets and automatic weapons are in most cases? Why can't regulators and regulations be placed on the gun industry? Hannah, we just talked about that. I mean, the NRA is very powerful. I was there in the Clinton administration when we passed, Congress and the Clinton administration passed, the first and only assault weapons ban in 1994. And you would have thought, from the ravings and hollerings of the NRA, that we had just declared World War III. And they, in fact, declared World War III on the Clinton administration, which is why a lot of people say that Democrats lost the House and the Senate in the midterm elections of 1994. And that loss scared Democrats to their bones. They did not want to vote on any other gun legislation. In fact, when the assault weapons ban was over, I mean, it was just a 10-year ban, and when it was over, it was not renewed in 2004. Why? Because a lot of Democrats and certainly Republicans didn't have the courage to renew it. Well, I hope they have the courage. You have some power here. You do. I do too. All of us do. We can hold our representatives and our senators accountable. We can find out where they stand on guns. And if you are in a state where your representative, a district, and also a state where your senators are not supporting reasonable, sensible, common sense gun regulation, get them out of there. Boot them out. Vote them out. Be an activist. Cleary Rogers, do the recent Supreme Court decisions on abortion and affirmative action actually diminish the argument that a ninth justice is needed before the election? Well, certainly on abortion. I mean, the fact that Justice Kennedy voted with the Democratic appointees means that even if Republicans eventually get a chance to vote their own justice in to replace Antonin Scalia, which I hope doesn't happen, we're still going to have a majority for abortion. Justice Kennedy, as long as Justice Kennedy is there, and as long as we have 4 Democratic appointees, I think Roe v. Wade is pretty safe for now. On other issues, no. We've got to make sure that either Republicans do have a vote on Merrick Garland. This is unprecedented, by the way. The fact that the Senate, or Republican Senate, or any Senate would not vote for a year on a president's nominee, or we've got to make sure that we get a Democrat in the White House, and we get a Democratic Senate, and we get a Supreme Court justice committed to overruling Citizens United, and also a Supreme Court justice that is sensible, that is on the side of the people rather than the powerful. Quentin Kermeen, the media is totally ignoring the lack of a vote on Judge Merrick Garland. This should be the top of the news daily. I agree. I mean, it's, what the cynical Republican position is, we don't have to hold a vote because the public has the attention span of a newt. And so, I mean Newt Gingrich. And so if nothing is done, the press is not going to say anything. Let's just do it. Well, they should be held accountable. There should be continuous a vigil. I mean, you know, if you're there, I mean, if you care about this issue, why not go to Washington and hold a vigil outside the Supreme Court, or outside, actually, it should be outside the Senate, not the Supreme Court, and say to the senators and every news reporter you can get, why aren't they doing their job, the Republicans in the Senate? Aaron Johnson, who gains from Brexit on the elite power level? The top 1% are just opportunistic politicians. Well, certainly opportunistic right-wing politicians who want to fan the flames of xenophobia and nationalism of a certain racist bent, they certainly are gaining from Brexit. The elites in Europe probably are not gaining. In fact, if Europe goes into a recession, although their savings are very well preserved and parked every place around the world where they're not going to be touched, nevertheless, the elites in Europe depend on a healthy European economy, and so they're not going to do as well as they would otherwise. Antonio Hernandez, if everyone in the U.S. had a college degree in the fields that were supposedly in need of workers, would everyone be able to have a job that pays more than minimum wage? If so, then who would work the minimum wage jobs? Well, Antonio, what you're getting at is that if we have a huge number of college graduates and we still have a limited number of good jobs, then the average wage in those jobs is going to go down. It's just supply and demand, and we are already seeing that. In fact, we're seeing, and I hate to say this because it sounds pretty discouraging, but it's the fact, and you want to know the facts. And the fact is that if you have a bachelor's degree, the entering wages, or the early wages, first 3 years of jobs, of people with bachelor's degrees are actually lower today than they were 5, 10, or 15 years ago. Certainly much lower than they were in 2000. And that's true of advanced degree holders too. In the first 3 or 4 years of work, those wages of advanced degree holders are lower today than they were in the year 2000. So we're already potentially seeing the possibility that given the structure of jobs right now, the number of good jobs we have, college graduates are not benefiting because there are too many. But the answer is not to have fewer college graduates or fewer graduates of technical schools. The answer is to restructure our economy so there are more good and better jobs. And we can get to that, but not right now. Devara Thinuk, Mr. Reich, people over 50 are having serious problems with long-term unemployment due to ageism. Why is no one talking about this? Well, Devorah, ageism is something that I feel very, very personally because I'm getting a little older, even me. And it is a serious problem. And a lot of companies these days, and we have data on it, and it's illegal, by the way. I mean, discrimination against people because of age violates federal law. But we also know that many companies are substituting younger workers for older workers, not because the younger workers are better. In fact, a lot of the older workers have much more experience, much more what we used to call wisdom and just common sense, but because the younger workers will work for less money. And the older workers, because they have seniority, really require more money. And so ageism really does have to be attacked. There are civil lawsuits you can mount. If you, Deborah, if you think that you are a victim of ageism or you are being discriminated against, you can, right now, you can mount an individual action or class action. You can go to the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission and you can register a complaint. All right, Reese Hill, at what point do you think the country will reach the point of overpopulation? Not in the sense of overpopulation, but in terms of the jobs available. Reese, I don't think it's a matter of job availability. Actually, what you see is that when we are in economic expansions, the business cycle goes up, we have very low unemployment, as right now, and then when we go downhill in terms of recession and the economy slows, we have fewer jobs. The real issue in terms of jobs is wages. The big problem we face is not a dearth of jobs, although that still is a problem for many people, don't get me wrong. The real problem is that the median wage, half the people above, half the people below. Half Americans are earning less now than Americans, the bottom half earned in the year 2000. And that trend, even though we've had recovery. Some people say it's a vigorous recovery. That trend is very, very dangerous. It's dangerous to our economy. It's dangerous to the social solidarity of our country. Musa Ali Shaman, can you talk about the impact of NAFTA and whether it has impacted the U.S. economy positively or negatively? Musa, when I was in the Clinton administration, NAFTA was being debated, and I was Secretary of Labor, and because I was Secretary of Labor, I had to go out and talk to a lot of audiences and say, well, the labor protections in NAFTA are going to be enough to maintain at least good jobs in America. I was wrong. The labor protections in NAFTA were not good enough. And a lot of jobs went to Mexico. But by now, those jobs that went to Mexico, most of them have gone on to China and on to Southeast Asia. So NAFTA, at the time, I think was oversold. I think that the only good that came out of NAFTA, as far as I can see, is that it helped Mexico weather the peso crisis of 1998. But in terms of American jobs, in terms of the American economy, NAFTA was, to me, sort of a bust. It was very, very, very difficult to enforce those labor and also environmental standards that were built into NAFTA as side agreements. Tiffany Landry, why is the term class warfare so toxic? It doesn't bother me. Why does it get under other people's skin? I think, Tiffany, because we in America have prided ourselves as being a classless society. Now, you know that's not true. I know that's not true. Many people are now catching on to the fact that we do have classes in America, and if you are working class or middle class, it's very hard for you to become part of the overclass, the wealthy class. If you're the underclass, if you are poor, it's very, very hard for you to move upward. And the key to what seemed like a classless society in America for so many years, 30, 40 years after the Second World War, was that we had a large and growing middle class. And almost everybody thought themselves part of that middle class. But now that middle class is shrinking. And as the middle class shrinks, and as more and more Americans come to believe that their children may not live as well as they are living, that underlying structure of class is becoming more and more real. So class warfare, I don't duck the term. The reality is that people at the top have declared class warfare on the rest of America. They're the ones that are rigging the economy against us. Monty Voigt, what do you think about the DNC, Democratic National Committee, platform committee process? Monty, first of all, don't get overly excited about the platform. I mean, platforms, 40 years ago, platforms were very important. But these days, when each candidate runs on their own ideas, their own particular platforms, what the Democratic National Committee or the Republican National Committee says about its platform is more symbolic than anything else. I think the DNC committee process is probably fine. I've heard a lot of stories about Bernie's ideas not getting enough traction. I did testify before the DNC Platform Committee last week. I didn't have much time. I talked about some things about getting big money out of politics, some changes that ought to be made with regard to overturning Citizens United and having full disclosure of all sources of campaign funding and ending the revolving door between Wall Street and Washington. I testified to the Platform Committee. I don't know if they are going to pay any attention. All right, Laura Delauer. I don't suddenly hate Warren. You're talking about Elizabeth Warren? But I am heartbroken by her decision to endorse Hillary. Bernie's trying to unite us. The DNC is not. Laura, look, I understand. I mean, Elizabeth Warren is a senator. She's a politician. She held out on endorsing Hillary Clinton. Every other woman senator endorsed Hillary Clinton. I have a lot of respect for Elizabeth Warren. And I don't think you want to be heartbroken in the sense that, we all have to be as realistic as possible about the importance of defeating Donald Trump. And also, at the same time, influencing Hillary Clinton as much as we possibly can. Now, I don't think that I am not prepared to say that the Bernie Sanders campaign is over. It is not over. It's not over until it's over. It's not over until Hillary Clinton is nominated officially in Philadelphia on the 25th or the 26th of July. But realistically, getting behind Hillary Clinton in order to make sure Donald Trump is not our next president strikes me not as an unreasonable goal. I was told to stop for a second. Shall I stop in mid-sentence? Shall I stop
The
now?
last question.
Last question.
Oh, this is the last question. Rona Beitler, besides your illustrations, have you ever tried doing serious artwork? Rona, are you suggesting that my art is not serious art? I mean, Rona. No, your question is a serious question. Have I ever tried to do serious art? Well, no. Anyway, so on that, let me just once again thank our great people. I want to thank Zoe Umlaut Beck and Yael Bridge, and I will see you next week.